Okay, hello and welcome once again. Um, I'm going to talk today a little bit about what a sovereign is. And there's this misconception in this sovereign movement, sovereign citizen movement. But essentially, a sovereign cannot be a citizen. The two are kind of separate from each other. You see, a sovereign is upon his own volition, and a citizen is upon the liberties granted to him by a governing state or statutory inferences. So, to give a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about, is I'm going to lay out a few things that I've come up with, and unfortunately, there is a lot of half-truths, misinformation, misleading information that's floating around on the internet right now, between YouTube and Wikipedia and all these other places that people tend to go to, rather than, like I always say, dig out thine own salvation with fear and trembling of the Lord. So a sovereign essentially takes his own responsibility for himself, does everything that he needs to do to be a free person, committing no crimes, following all governing laws of the land. Now, statutes essentially are created that you don't have to consent to because they're not laws. They are, more than anything else, they are admiralty, maritime statutes. Okay? But that's something we'll get into another place, another time. I kind of just want to lay a foundation for you, and I'm going to do my best to limit it to about 15 minutes at the request of my previous videos, which have been 30 to 45 minutes. I'm going to be redoing the videos. I know, I understand the quality of this video isn't the greatest, but we're not watching this, and I'm not doing this for the quality of the video or to show how great my technology is. It's the knowledge that I'm giving for free, giving to you to take your own responsibility on. The truth is to be told and not sold. Unfortunately, many places on the internet where you can go to get this information only give you small little pieces of it, and then request or require that you pay them some kind of a fee, whether nominal or otherwise, to get the rest of the information. I just don't think that's fair, and I don't believe that that is the way that it should be. That is the problem. So moving forward, a sovereign, like I said, is on his own volition. A citizen is governed by the government. Now, the sacred and public knowledge of self-governing sovereignty and practicing your freedoms or exercising your freedoms over accepting the liberties that are in creation of government societies, this can be dangerous in the proverbial hands of those who would to do harm. And this has been seen and proven in the records of war and of crimes against humanity. However, any free person governed by God and common law who chooses not to consent are in no way required or bound to take any notice of those statutes that are quoted, because they are made by a legal fiction called the government. Now, having that said, I'm going to give you a quick list, the first 8 things that I'm going to give you, and I use Evernote. I would suggest getting Evernote. I put everything on my Evernote. It's easy. I have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of documents available to my hands at any time, at any moment for reference. And it's a lot easier than carrying around a Black's Law dictionary, and other documents and items that, it's not feasible to carry those around. So, breaking into this, the first 8 that I want to give you, these would be understandings that I think are required for you to begin your journey as a sovereign and to effectively separate yourself from the citizenship that was created for you through the Social Security Act, your birth certificate, and the 14th Amendment, which the 14th Amendment is a whole topic on its own. All right, so I'm just going to read off the 8 items that I believe would be a good place for you to start. First of all, understanding the language. And in understanding the language, I'm speaking about knowing the difference between when you are referencing your English and referencing towards your legalese. Now, this is something that you can easily understand. Get yourself a Black's Law Dictionary, Bovier's Dictionary, whatever. But is knowing the difference in the language that you're speaking is a huge, huge part. Is generally about 50% of what you're going to be discovering as you begin to be a sovereign, taking personal responsibility for yourself, governing yourself. Okay? Number 2, what are rights? There is a big difference between your rights and your freedoms as well as liberties. Now, rights can fall under both categories of either your freedoms or your liberties. However, your freedoms are separate from your liberties. Liberties are those granted to you. Freedoms can't be given or taken away. You can just choose not to exercise them. Okay? Number 3, understanding your legal fiction. Being able to utilize your legal fiction or your straw man, as it's been referenced on a lot of these websites. There really is no legal straw man reference. That's kind of sort of something that was created, I don't know where, but it's flooding the information superhighway. The real term which you would want to use is your legal fiction. Okay, essentially it's the same exact thing, only legal fiction is the proper way to say it. Now this is tied to your birth certificate and your social security number and the Social Security Act. All right, now number 4, understanding admiralty law, common law, and the difference between civil court and criminal court. All right, these are going to be the basic steps if you end up dealing with any kind of a legal process. Okay. Number 5, your right to travel. This is huge right here. Your right to travel. This is one very small part of the whole being a sovereign deal, but it is so big in concern to you dealing with the public or with the government, because essentially this is the one item that you can go and practice and exercise and begin to do immediately, and it is one of the biggest steps that you can take to effectively free yourself from any kind of contract that you may have which limits your freedoms and only grants you liberties. Okay, now I'm not saying anything about breaking the laws. No, you follow the laws, you obey the laws, you respect the law enforcement agents. All right, they're really public servants. But what I'm going to get into a little bit later is describing, what their stance really is, and it's not to protect you. It's not to do anything with you. It's really to protect the corporation of the United States government. Another topic. Number 6, your affidavits of truth. You need to be filing affidavits. You need to be putting on public record your intentions and your proclamations. Okay? Without you personally doing this, there's very little that you can do to utilize the statements made by others, such as the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution. All of these things are not granted to you. Okay? You have to lay them out yourself and claim them. All right, they're not given to you. In fact, here in America, because of the United States government, the only thing that you have the right to, you have the right to life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Okay, you don't have the right to freedom. You don't have the right to the Constitution. You don't have the right to the Bill of Rights. You don't have those rights. You do not have them because you are a citizen, all right? Not a sovereign. You are a citizen. 14th Amendment. So filing your affidavits helps to clarify this. Number 7, creating a lawful private identification card. This is a topic that I'll have to do another time, but you can do a lot of research on this, and most of the information out there on this particular topic is actually pretty right on, so you can't go too wrong with this. It's a simple matter of following the Uniform Commercial Code, of following all the statutes, and basically using their rules to benefit you rather than to incriminate you, incarcerate you, prevent you from your freedoms. So creating a lawful private identification card, it answers their questions and it keeps you out of a jurisdiction that you don't want to be involved with, because it will take away your freedoms. And number 8, consenting to statutory law. You can Google this, you can read the definitions, but essentially statutory law must be consented to. Well, if you say, well, I didn't consent to any of it, did you get a driver's license? Do you have a birth certificate? Have you separated yourself from the 14th Amendment? Do you consider yourself a citizen? Are you in any kind of contract with any kind of government agency? Well, you consented. Whether you know it or not, you consented. Also, if you have not responded, that is tacit acquiescence. You've consented by not saying anything. By saying I have not consented, you have consented. It's just the way that it works. Now I'm going to give you 4 quick rules to the game, and just keep these in mind. I'm not going to get too much into detail. They're just really thoughts for you to chew on. Number 1, there is no money. All right? There is no money. There is legal tender, but there is no money. All right? Anything in forms of trade, you want to have intrinsic value, trade and barter systems, whatever. But as far as we're concerned today, there is no money. All right? There's legal tender. But we unfortunately are not using any lawful money and haven't been since the bankruptcy of America. So moving on, number 2, public and private do not mix. All right? If you want to remain a sovereign, you stay private. If you are a citizen, that is public. All right? Number 3, stay in honor at all costs. Stay in honor at all costs. Be the bigger man. Take the high road. You don't have to explain, excuse, any of that, argue, any of that. I highly suggest against doing any of those things. Remain in honor. Silence is golden. And number 4, do not participate in any public controversies. What do I say by this, participate in any public controversies? When you see these yahoos marching around the streets, clogging up traffic during rush hour when people need to get to and fro from work or hospital or groceries or kids or whatever, you got these people in the middle of the streets yelling, screaming, holding up banners and signs, doing exactly what the government wants you to do so that they have some kind of a reason to say, look at these animals behaving disorderly or conducting themselves in such a manner in which is preventing commerce from being able to continue. So don't take part in public controversy. Everything that you need to do to be a sovereign, everything that you need to do to protect your rights is done personally and privately, not with 10,000 other people marching through the streets creating headache for those who really could not care less. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people in this nation that, as long as they can have their fancy car and their fancy house and they can pay their great cable bill and watch their football and eat their nice steak, wear their great jewelry and they're fashionable. As long as they can do that, they really don't care about these other things that really actually do matter to those of us who know where this nation is heading, what we are in store for, and actually want to take our private steps of maintaining our sovereignty. All right, so moving on. And unfortunately my timer didn't start for me, so I'm not sure if I'm in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Either way, I'm going to continue until I feel like I've at least covered what needs to be covered here. It's important to know who you are in the relation to your government. All right, now this is a closely guarded secret, mostly because of the banking cartels and other out of control government companies that thrive on the suffering of the people. All right, the people unknowingly and unwittingly submit to unnecessary intrusions upon personal rights and liberties simply because they are either denied basic education necessary to effectively articulate and prove that they're not 14th Amendment persons, or a lack or a disinterest to even know these things. All right, so let me give you a couple quick little maxims, in reference to this particular topic, okay? Now, law can give rise to legal fiction, okay? But legal fiction cannot give rise to the law. All right, if this were possible, then any government could make a law promulgating its own lifetime forever and ever and ever. But fortunately, all governments are bound by law and cannot create law. Only the people can really create the law. All right, so keeping in mind that there is a difference between America, the nation, of which I am an American national, right? I am not a United States government citizen, all right? I do have control of my legal fiction that was created for me through the birth certificate and social security card when I was born, before I was of legal age of consent. So I can't be forced into a contract when I'm not even legally able to be in a contract. I don't even understand English or legalese when I'm just an infant. Yet these things are created for me, and then I'm put into them and subject to them unless I release myself or end those contracts, or effectively return those contracts with an amendment, through my affidavit saying, yes, I will accept these contracts and this legal fiction. My agent in commerce is how I prefer to reference it. So your legal fiction or your agent in commerce. These are things that you're going to be dealing with if you deal with, taxes and, whatnot. All right, so moving on to a little bit of a legislative timeline here on how we got to this situation. You had the Declaration of Independence, right? The Federal Reserve Act, the Social Security Act. Now, these particular acts and legislative introductions are kind of the foundation of what has taken away our freedoms and forced us to accept liberties. Well, not really forced us to accept liberties, but fooled us into giving our freedoms away to accept our liberties. All right? It's not called the Statue of Freedom. It's called the Statue of Liberty. All right? What are liberties? Liberties are what's granted to you. You can do this or that within this particular, bound, these boundaries. So understand that there's a difference between your liberties and your freedoms, okay? You can't take away a freedom, can't give it, you can just not exercise it. All right? Another thing I would suggest you do is, I'm going to be putting a video on the introduction of the birth certificate, and also another video I will be doing to keep in mind, to keep watching for, is the United States filing bankruptcy, the beginning of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and then California seceding from the federal government. All right, now I choose to put the Constitution of California in with my affidavits for my executor trust. The reason why is because there's a lot of things in there that really helps me to maintain my sovereignty and correctly identify me as a live, living, flesh and blood human being born of a natural mother. Everything that I'm saying, you may say, well, why did you have to go extensively and say that? Well, you have to. Unfortunately, you really have to. Okay? If you don't, then these courts of presumption are going to make the presumption for you and state who you are, whether you like it or not. They're going to tell you this is who you are. You're a 14th Amendment citizen, and therefore you can only do these things, or you are the trustee of the SESTK trust, birth certificate, social security card. All right, you want to be sui juris, so this is essentially you taking your own volition and your own responsibility. All right, now to retouch on affidavits essentially is your truth in commerce. Right? Now understand that an unrefuted affidavit becomes truth in commerce. All right? This becomes truth in law. So when you file your affidavits, if nobody says otherwise, that is considered now a public record the truth and is binding and upholding by law. And any judge will have to recognize it as the truth, and nobody can say otherwise. All right? Now, binding contracts can give way to jurisdiction. enforceable judgments, and your loss of rights. So it's very, very important that you personally take an inventory of all the contracts that you are involved with. And there's ways that you're involved in contracts that you may not be fully aware of. So your birth certificate is a binding contract. Social security number, binding contract. Your driver's license is a binding contract. These are binding contracts. These can give way to jurisdiction. All right, these can take away your rights and give way to enforceable judgments that you may see as unnecessary or over far-reaching jurisdiction, which most of the time they are, and they're all based to try, it's financial, follow the money, the paper trail, follow the money. Okay, so moving forward, just know that common law references the law of the land, right, and they are the only law. Anything else is admiralty jurisdiction, which is governed by the Uniform Commercial Code, which most of those are enforceable only through statutes. Okay, now a contract takes many forms, and some contracts are intentionally deceptive, or they contain misleading information, yet they're legal and enforceable. Tacit acquiescence, we have forfeited our sovereignty and accepted citizenship. This is one of those deals. All right, now all of the statutes quoted are nothing more than just rules and regulations of a particular society, right? Not of a land of people, not of the indigenous natives of the land, okay? Now, a society that has no lawful standing because it cannot be specifically named, a society whose rules and regulations are therefore entirely void and irrelevant, all right? So, keeping in mind, your government is one of these societies. Now, your nation, America, your nation is not a society. It is a land of the people. But you're not part of that land of the people. You are a citizen governed by this society, right? You're part of a government society, United States government society. A society that operates solely by fraudulent deception and purporting to make the law, a society whose rules and regulations only apply to those who consent to be bound by them. So, are you going to consent to be bound by them, or are you going to clarify and make a distinction between, are you part of the society, or are you a people live flesh and blood people of the land, a native, indigenous, your domicile? All right, so now I've laid a little bit of that groundwork right there, a little bit of understanding. I'm going to jump into some things, and I'm going to move pretty quickly here, so feel free to pause at any time and do your own research, reference your Black's Law Dictionary, do some Google research or whatever, because don't take anything that I say as 100% gospel. I am a man and I make mistakes, and I could be wrong on various number of things from time to time. However, I do my due diligence, okay? I take personal responsibility, and I've spent the last 10 years of my life doing nothing but research, reading. I'm addicted to reading. I'm addicted to knowledge. I'm addicted to information. So for me, this is a hobby. For me, this is a passion. For me, this is a lifestyle. It's a way of life. For most people, this is an inconvenience. For most people, this is, something that's going to take up their time when they'd rather be watching football or, watching the BET Awards or, seeing, reading their People's Magazine or whatever. This stuff that's only for distraction, and it's very flaccid and will pass anyway. What I'm talking about are things that are really important and that are most behooving for you. It's up to you if you want to accept them or not. But don't go and take any of my information and use it negatively or use it to give true sovereigns, a bad name, or make us look like, oh, these sovereign citizens are a bunch of, douchebags, and they just want to go around and commit crimes and be able to get away with it. No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, anybody who commits a crime is subject and should, be penalized for committing a crime. But what are crimes? Is open container in public, is that a crime? Running a stop sign, is that a crime? Not paying a parking ticket is that a crime. These are statute violations. These are not crimes. Crime is if I injure somebody, if I deprive them of their personal property or damage or destroy their property, or if I prevent them from their locomotion, from their freedom of their right to travel. These are crimes. These are real crimes. Okay, but we're not talking about crimes, we're talking about statutes. All right? Now, here we go. I'm going to be moving forward pretty fast. And make sure to pause and reference all of this information yourself. I encourage it. Okay? Geographical definition of the United States according to the GPO.gov. The United States Code is a codification by subject matter of the general and permanent laws of the United States. It is divided by broad subjects pursuant to the following is the Uniform Commercial Code, or the UCC. All right, moving forward. Gold fringe on flags in the courtroom, if you ever go there. This indicates the jurisdiction of commercial law, also known as British maritime law or admiralty law. All right, now what I was speaking to before about law enforcement officers, police, now listen to this very carefully, all right? And this is referenced in case law. It is not the duty of the police to protect Americans. All right, their job is to protect the corporation and to arrest code breakers, not lawbreakers, code breakers. Right? Now, where can you find this information in case law? I'm going to tell you. Sapp versus Tallahassee, 348 SO 2nd 363. Also, in Reif versus the City of Philadelphia, spelled REIFF versus the City of Philadelphia, 477F SUPP 1262. Also in Lynch versus North Carolina, Department of Justice. This is 376 SE 2nd 247. All right. Now, understand that, like I said, this is all based upon legalese, okay, not English. So if you are trying to understand these things based only upon the English terms and definitions that you know, you're never going to get this, you're never going to understand it. It's just going to be a chaotic mess for you. But that's how the system is structured, to keep you dumbed down and in the dark, right? And anytime that you put an S in front of words, what does it become? They become swords. Now, when is the pen mightier than the sword? When the tip is felt. Well, just chew on that for a second, okay? Now, is it legal to be lawful? What about lawful to be legal? And what does that really mean? All right, now Roman maxim for this would be the Roman maxim, to he who would be deceived, let him, okay? If you're so ignorant that you're going to not know this information and be deceived by it, well, then that's your right to be that ignorant and deceived, and it's also your personal responsibility to bring yourself out of the deception. All right, now two types of law that I'm going to quickly breeze over: the law of the land and the law of the high seas, right, or the law of water. Now, you can study which is which and what each of them mean, but essentially I've already covered them through talking about maritime law, admiralty law, the difference between civil courts and criminal courts, okay? But to give a little understanding, the law of the land varies from culture to culture and is based upon the indigenous people of that land. All right, now the law of the water is referred to the law of money, or the law of commerce. And the reason why is because back in the olden days, when trade was going back and forth, through ships docking at, the different, piers, different docks to give trade spices, silk, gold, what have you. These things were, this situation required a general, uniform, commercial commerce code of conduct, a way that, one nation can say, hey, they're not conducting themselves according to, a way that's behooving of commerce, a way that benefits, both, all parties. All right, so keep that in mind. This is what we're dealing with here. All right, now, some information here that's just food for thought. I'm just going to breeze over it. This is stuff that I've been, typing up and compiling for years now, for about a decade now. All right, so by no way am I just pulling this stuff out of my but I'm actually getting this information and verifying it and doing my thorough due diligence. And then I'm sharing it with you guys for free. I'm not charging for any of this. I would never charge for the information. I don't want to. Too many people are charging for this information, and those that deserve it who can't afford it, unfortunately, are stuck, in a situation where they don't know where to go. They don't know where to turn to. They don't have the means or the abilities or the concepts to be able to dig out their own salvation. So, quickly moving forward, what is the Statue of Liberty? Or why is the Statue of Liberty not on American land? Because it's not the freedom statue. Merchants and travelers are given liberties and not freedoms. Now, why go to court? Well, because like basketball, you have hoops to jump through, right? Like tennis, it's a racket. It's a back and forth, ball game. And the judge is essentially the referee. Hence, the judge wears this black robe. All right. Now, the judge rules from the bench. All right. Now, the bench is Latin for bank. Now, what do rivers do? They control the flow of the money, the currency. Okay? These are all little wordplay, food for thought things that you should think about. Why are all ships and vessels referred to as female? Well, because your body is considered maritime admiralty product. All right? And this is due to your birth certificate, essentially the warehouse receipt, the storehouse receipt from when your mother, the vessel, birthed at the dock and delivered the goods and got a birth certificate. Now, anytime Japan sends their Toyotas over here to the States, they dock at the birth, deliver their goods, and then they get a birth certificate, also known as a store or warehouse receipt. Okay? So, let me see, where was I there? Okay. Now, just to give you an idea why you're going from water unto land, because when you're in the placenta, it's full of water, right? Okay, so your mother's the vessel. She's the ship. You're going from water unto land. You're still considered that product. We're all considered chattel until we effectively utilize our legal fiction and clarify to all governing states that we are alive, a real person of our own volition, answerable only unto God. Unless we commit crimes, then we have to answer to the people, right? Now, are you a citizen out of your own mouth and your own volition, testifying that you are a citizen of the United States? If you say yes, you admit to being an employee of a foreign corporation operating under an international maritime law. Our president is the president of a privately owned company. All right, Obama is the president of a privately owned company. He's not the president of the United States of America, the nation. Okay. The company is called the United States, privately owned company out of England, and you can go and you can search this out for yourself. And this company corporation existed, back in colonial times. All right, before 1776, this corporation existed. All right, now Black's Law Dictionary for the word agreement is as follows: a mutual understanding between two or more persons about the relative rights and duties regarding past, or future performances. A manifestation of mutual consent by two or more persons. All right, an agreement can be expressly drawn out or implied. Now, these courts are all implied. They imply, that you are a citizen, and they imply that you have agreed to follow these statutes. They have implied that you are the trustee of your Sesticate trust, a trustee of your birth certificate, when the real trustee are those who take an oath of office and the public servants. You are actually the beneficiary, but they've gotten you to give up your benefits and become a trustee and held liable. So I'm going to give you some more information for Black's Law Dictionary. If you don't have one, you should be able to pull up a PDF of this information. It shouldn't be too difficult to find. Now, using a Black's Law Dictionary, research the definitions of the word person, citizen, corporation, statute, capitalize, summons, must, freeman, sovereign, citizen, straw man, which, this refers to your straw man and your legal fiction, and maritime admiralty law. Okay, do this research on your own. All right. Also, another thing, keep this in mind too. The IRS, the CIA, the FBI, the FCC, NASA, FDIC, these are not, nor have they ever been, government agencies. They are private corporations. They're private companies, privately held. There are, most of them that have, public stock and are traded on the stock exchange. So understand that because they're not actually national agencies, then you are only held liable to enter into contract if you choose to, whether expressly written out or implied through tacit acquiescence. So another thing that I'm gonna do a video on, but I'm just gonna breeze over it right now real quick for you, is the zip code and why you want to refrain from using a zip code on any of your mailing correspondence. Okay, and this can be referenced in case law, Dyett versus Turner, and that's spelled D-Y-E-T-T versus Turner, 439 P. 2nd 266. All right. Now, as I've stated previously, if you've seen the video, that federal personal income tax is collected under a military venue within a martial law jurisdiction. All right, Federal Reserve notes are military script. They're circulated within a military venue. The military venue, covering the entire United States, was brought into existence through the Social Security Act. Under the Social Security Act, there was brought into existence the federal regional areas. These 10 federal regional areas are the same as a military base. It is not unconstitutional to circulate military script on a military base, as the base is considered to be a military venue. Military script cannot circulate in the civil jurisdiction on the several states, on the several states to get around this constitutional bar. The Congress, via the Social Security Act, created 10 venues called the federal regional areas. The problem is that the Congress realized that while they could reconstruct and restructure government agencies into these federal regional areas, but the people could not be properly identified to be within the military venue by their own consent. So what was the natural solution for them? Well, the natural solution was to create another military venue, all right, that would trick the people into voluntarily accepting the recognition that they were within the military venue. Congress solved this problem by creating the zip codes. All right, you can send mail without using a zip code. Okay, you can do it outside of the government. You can give your mail back and forth. Essentially, you could be your own postmaster general. That's a whole nother topic, and maybe I'll do a video on that too. But it's the least of the worries right now, and it's probably one of the furthest things in the steps to do. All right. Now, as far as law is concerned here, the misconception is that any rule or regulation that governs them falls under one category: law. There are many other forms of law that people abide by without realizing that they abide to, simply because they do not, they believe that it doesn't apply to them. Now, a misconception is that the U.S. Constitution gives us our rights. Don't believe this. A Constitution does nothing more than list our rights we already have. We are born with inalienable rights, endowed to us by our Creator. They are not given to us and cannot be taken away. The most a person can do with the right is choose not to exercise it, or choose to exercise it. All right? Another misconception: licenses, permits, registrations, other forms of documentation that are required to operate motor vehicles or use public roads, build structures and establishments, engage in free enterprise, and much more than this. People believe that it's required. Well, if you incriminate yourself, or if you state that you are driving a vehicle, then yeah, you have to abide by those statutes. But if you clarify that it's your private conveyance and you're exercising your right to freedom of locomotion on the public way in your private conveyance, your automobile, not your vehicle, and that you are not using it in forms of commerce, well, there's no requirement for any of these licenses or registrations. I've said it before and I'll say it again. For instance, if I go and I buy an iPad, right, and I have the decision, do I want to register my iPad or not register my iPad? Maybe I'll register the iPad in case something happens to it, or maybe I'll add that iPad into my UCC filings as my personal and private property. But am I going to pay Apple annually every year to put a sticker on my iPad to be able to use it? No, I'm not going to do that. And there's no requirement to do that. But it's the same exact thing that you people are doing every time you go and you pay your registration and you keep a contract going with a third-party non-government agency that you're not forced to enter the contract with. Okay, exercise your freedoms. Don't just limit yourself to liberties. All right. Quick little side note, courts, and I've already covered this, but courts displaying the gold fringe around the flags, this indicates that you are now in a military venue or Admiralty Maritime court, okay? This is the difference between your civil and your criminal, all right? Maritime Admiralty, law of the water, a body of private international law governing the relationships between private entities which operates vessels on the ocean. Now, originally this was created to govern the ships docking back and forth, as we know, but dealing with the banks and merchants' affairs specifically, not with civil affairs. Well, they've far extended their jurisdiction somehow into entering into our private civil affairs because we've let them, and they've done this through what I like to call word magic. Okay, they've essentially through verbal smoke and mirrors have tricked you into believing these things. Oh wow, well really that's how it is? Well, no, wrong. Do a little research. A simple pervasion of language to manipulate and convince society that these things are true and valid is how they go about continuing to keep us citizens and continuing to keep us limited to liberties. All right. Now I'm going to move forward. All right, we've already covered some of this stuff. Don't want to be too redundant, but real quick, I'll just read off some of the notes that I have. When a product is taken off of a ship and brought into a foreign land, that nation takes custody of the resource and accounts for it with a certificate. The certificate marks the birth of the product in the custody of the respective nation. Why is it supposedly required to have a certificate of live birth? Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms. Certificate, paper establishing ownership or claim, i.e. birth certificate. All right. Now, the Federal Reserve Act, the bankruptcy of the nation, the institution of the Social Security Act, these are all tied together. They really are all tied together. And it's kind of sort of one hand washing the other and giving one hand justification to be enforceable over the other. Now, the United States declared bankruptcy March 9th, 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay the debt, citizens were offered as the collateral. This essentially could have been considered high treason to everybody in Congress, that all of them could be taken out and hung or shot, killed instantly. But they did some sneaky things just after that to avoid this. One of them was HJR 192, House Joint Resolution 192, which effectively gives us the ability to discharge our debt. That's a whole nother topic we'll get into, and that unfortunately is one of the biggest misconceptions I see floating around on the internet, with so much information that is just not correct. Unfortunately, a lot of people are getting themselves in a lot of trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, with the government and whatnot, and then essentially committing fraud. Nothing I'm going to suggest is anything that can be construed as fraud, because I follow the Uniform Commercial Code. I understand I'm dealing with companies, and therefore contracts rule. If you understand the contract and you rule the contract, who's to say otherwise? Okay. I'm not going off of theories, and I'm not going off of what we feel we should do to rise up and go against an anarchy and all this. No. When I was young, when I was your age, people, most of you were watching this when I was your age, yeah, I was very much a militant, more than anything, I guess, a dissident. But I've learned other ways of being able to go about conducting my private affairs in a way that does not put me in dishonor and keeps me out of public controversy. I'm trying to help you all do the same as well. All right, so another thing to consider too is if you've been married and you have a marriage certificate. Well, this is, falls into the same kind of guidelines as a birth certificate, okay? There is such thing as a common law marriage. All right, you don't have to go about paying registration or getting permission or begging to, marry somebody or conduct your private affairs. Okay, if you look at all of these certificates, one thing that you'll notice that's in common with them, I'm going to give you a list for you to be able to go and find this out for yourself and to list this down, because you're going to want to write all of this information down when you file your affidavits and when you file your UCC1, UCC3, UCC5, all of that. Look at the date of issuance of that certificate, the serial number on the certificate, the registration or the receipt number for that certificate, the description of the product, the authorized informant, which is the signature of the medical attendant or the judge or the priest that signed off on your marriage certificate. Okay, all of them will have this, and this is because they all have to follow the guidelines under Uniform Commercial Codes. All right. Now, upon signing these documents, you're indirectly waiving your rights under the Constitution and lowering your status to that of a corporation created with the same exact name as you. Okay? This is your birth certificate. It has the same name that you've been going by this whole time. What you didn't know is that was your legal fiction. That was your agent in commerce. Okay? The only way to reconcile your true name from the name of the corporation that you're subject to until you prove otherwise is to take notice that the corporation has its name in all capital letters. Now, this is known as Capitis Dominus Maximo, or Maxima. But this is kind of one of these gray areas because legislation has been passed and more legislation is being passed and more statutes instituted which would null and void any derivative of your name. So you got to go a step further than just saying, oh, well, look, this is all in caps and that's not me. The courts right now are kind of sort of dismissing that and finding ways around it and not even regarding that when they should be, but they're not. But this is all based upon the laws that currently exist, all right? But study and find out what are the terms of capitalization and what is the term of capital, okay? Because more than in English, in legalese, the implications, it's not so much what is done or what is said, but it is the implication of these things. What's going to happen after this fact. All right? Social contract. Social contract, the express or implied agreement between citizens and their government by which individuals agree to surrender certain freedoms in exchange for mutual protection. An agreement forming the foundation of a political society. The term is primarily associated with political philosophers such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and especially Jean-Jacques Rousseau, though it can be traced all the way back to the Greek sophists. So these terms go back far, far, far beyond the United States, far beyond even the modern understanding of Britain and their monarch type rule that has governed Europe for most of the ages. And now this democracy that we supposedly have here in this nation, that's a farce, excuse me. To give you an understanding of this term straw man, I don't like to use this word straw man or refrain from using it. It's an invented word. It doesn't really have any legal standing. What you would want to say is legal fiction or agent in commerce. But to give you an understanding, this person was born the same day you were, looks just like you, has the same name, lives in your home, and you've probably been paying all of his parking tickets and his taxes and all of that. But what you haven't realized is that this person has been dead from day one. Okay, every birth certificate is a legal fiction created to confuse you into thinking that this is who you are and nothing more. So there is the human, live, flesh and blood, born of a natural woman you, and then there is the paper reference of who you are. Okay. Now, most of you have already spoken about what legalese is, and I'm going to be doing a video on this, but legalese, when it seems that the government officials and the court clerks and the police officers are speaking to you in terms that you recognize as English, they're actually speaking to you in terms of legalese. And this is specifically designed to get you to sign documents, enter into contracts, incriminate yourself, and allow their jurisdiction to supersede over your freedoms and your rights. Okay? For instance, when you have a court official that asks you if you understand these charges against you, if you say, yes, I understand the charges against me, but, or however, or you immediately go into trying to argue against them, you don't realize that in legalese terms, when you said, yes, I understand, you just said, I willingly agree and will subject myself to your contracts henceforth. So you really need to properly understand and be able to stand under your own volition, and to correctly identify when you are referencing English and when you're referencing the terms through legalese. Okay. Now, speaking about registration, this registration goes back, long time ago. This goes back to the days of the monarchs, when people had to register their land. They had to register their property, because to register something means that you are essentially giving ownership and the right to do whatever to somebody else while you just maintain it or operate it or use it. Okay? For instance, you're registering your vehicle. When you register your vehicle, you're not the owner of it. You are the licensed operator. Okay? The DMV, if you don't pay your registration, can come in and take your car away, impose fines on you, take away your driver's license. Through courts, they can actually be able to get this money out of you through wage garnishments and so forth. Okay, now, is this legal? Yes. Is it lawful? Yes. Is it right? Well, I'll let you decide that. If you're a sovereign, no. This is far-reaching jurisdiction. If you're a citizen, well, unfortunately, they have every right to do so. Okay, so registration, when you register something with the government, they assume custody of that property. You register as the keeper and operator of that property. The government can take it or deny use of it, deny you to use it, if you don't pay certain taxes, registrations, fines, tickets, and whatnot. We do have to register our newborns with a birth certificate. Or why, let me ask you this, why do we have to register our newborns with a birth certificate? Because essentially, and you can go, and I highly suggest that you go and you look up the inaugural speech for Woodrow Wilson. Okay, he was one of our presidents, if you don't know who he was. But his inaugural speech, he said, soon it shall be required that every person will be required, it shall be required for every parent to register their biological product. What does that mean? Well, this was before the time of the birth certificate and Social Security Act. This is right when it was about to happen. And he told it, and he said it right there in the speech. And most people don't really listen to these speeches that are given by our presidents, because there's a lot of information that is given to us in these speeches that lets us know what is coming, how to prepare ourselves. Okay? So now we have birth certificates. Now we're registering our biological products. And the government through CPS can come in and tell us, hey, you can't discipline your children that way, or you have to send them to this particular school district, or you can or cannot do this or that. It's your biological product, but you've registered it. You've given ownership over to the state. You're just allowed to operate it until it's able to operate itself, right? Driver's license, I'm not going to go there right now. DMV, I'm not going to go there right now. I've covered that in the right to travel. But I will quickly go over something else before I end this particular video. And what I want to talk about here is, just give me 1 second to pull my notes up here. Okay, so one thing that I wanted to quickly go over before I end this video are 10 maxims of commercial law for you all to study and research out on your own, okay? Now, silence is considered acquiescence, and this is a principle of law. And what I'm about to tell you are some steps for you to be able to maintain your private affairs, all right? These are just maxims here. Number 1, a workman is worthy of his hire. You can find this in Exodus 20:13, Leviticus 19:13, Matthew 10:10, Luke 10:7. By no ways am I attempting to promulgate any kind of doctrine or indoctrination or religion, any of that. I am not religious at all in any way by any means. I'm a spiritual being in a flesh and blood vessel. However, I do think that a lot of, from my Gnostic information, Gnostic being one who knows, researching the older texts, the older doctrines, that there's a lot of valuable information that you can find and that you can receive from it. But you have to look at it with a particular eye and not a religious eye. Okay, so if you can get past the fact that I'm referencing religious texts and doctrines, but understand the principles that I'm trying to give to you, I hope that it will help you a lot. Now, another maxim, number 2, all are equal under the law. Equality is before the law. Okay, equality is required before the law. All right, number 3, in commerce, truth is sovereign. All right, well, what is truth? Number 4, truth is expressed in the form of an affidavit. Okay, number 5, an unrefuted affidavit is truth in commerce. One who does not deny admits. Number 6, an unrebutted affidavit also becomes the judgment in commerce. You can now take that and get yourself a remedy. Number 7, in commerce, for any matter to be resolved, it must be expressed. And he who fails to assert his rights has none. Understand, he who fails to assert his rights has none. Number 8, he who leaves the battlefield first loses by default. Okay? So don't give up, don't quit. You stay at it, but maintain yourself in honor and take no part of public controversy. Okay? You don't always have to answer questions. You can ask a question to a question that was asked to you. You know, if someone says, "Is this your vehicle?" You don't have to tell them yes or no, that this is your vehicle. You don't even have to explain this. It's not a vehicle, it's an automobile. You say, what is the reason for the stop? Is this a Terry stop? What is the emergency? You're asking a question to a question they asked you. They have to respond to, right? Now, going along this, he who leaves the battlefield first loses theory, not really theory, but maxim of law. An affidavit that is unrebutted, point for point, stands as truth in commerce. So you don't necessarily always have to win at everything, but if you're able to prevent them from continuing to move forward, or if you create for them, whoever they are, the unwillingness to continue and to maintain their status on that battlefield, as long as you stay there, you win. So, continue with your affidavits, continue telling the truth, continue making your public declarations and asking all questions necessary. Number 9, sacrifice is the measure of credibility. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Number 10, a lien or claim can be satisfied only through a rebuttal of an affidavit, resolution by a jury, or payment. Now, I'm going to leave you with another thing to study. I know I've kind of, given a huge chunk here, but I believe that you all are intelligent beings enough to be able to go and get this information and, you know, keep your sovereignty. I would suggest studying the code of Hammurabi. Now, it's spelled Hamarabi. You study this code, there's a lot of these maxims are in there, and they're going to explain it. So, ending this little video here, laying kind of a foundation for you. I'm going to be doing more videos here coming up soon. I've just been trying to find the time to edit and take the notes and being able to get a concise methodology to it. But there's so much information that is all related to each other that I'm finding it very difficult to make things super simple. I would like to, but I think more importantly than making things simple is that I am thorough and that I bring clarification. So enjoy this video and the upcoming videos, and present yourself accordingly when you're in public and when you're dealing with any of the public at all. So take that, enjoy it, and have a blessed one.